So greetings. Yes, indeed. Checking in once again from the home studio, which once again is my bathroom. To explain, the reason I shoot a lot of these in the bathroom is because it has the best acoustics. So, joining you once again for what seems like probably the 5 millionth time, because I've done a number of these podcasts where I feel like I constantly have to deal with having to remind people that our lives are important too. Just a couple of months ago, I sat in here at the start of the summer after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis on Memorial Day. And now I sit here as the summer gets set to come to an unofficial end because Labor Day is coming up, as is my birthday. And now it's Jacob Blake. This time, it caused the sports world to come to a screeching halt. You got to think about this. In the middle of a restarted pandemic NBA playoffs, where you've already lost 3 months of the year to this disease that has shut this whole country down needlessly. The original pandemic, known as racism, is still not only alive, but seemingly thriving more than ever. And as someone who remembers Amadou Diallo being shot at 41 times, hit 27 of them, losing his life because he reached into his pocket to show his ID after being accosted by police in New York City. He was dead before they hit the ground. Dead before he hit the ground. As someone who remembers what happened to Amadou Diallo, seeing what's going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which could just as easily be Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It could just as easily be Chicago, Illinois. It could just as easily be Houston, Texas. It could just as easily be my hometown, Detroit, Michigan. It could be Miami, Florida. It could be wherever. Seeing this repeatedly play out. We're in the midst of a pandemic, and yet this still goes on. I applaud the NBA athletes and the WNBA. You notice the hat that I'm wearing right now. This thing right here. It's a classic version of the Detroit Lions lid. The Detroit Lions were the first pro sports team in the United States to make a major stand for Jacob Blake. Now, you got to understand, the Detroit Lions, this franchise right here, ain't known for taking bold steps. They're not known for getting out in front on anything, being on the forefront of anything, having any true moral compass. And you know the relationship that this podcast has had with this franchise. And yet they took a stand because those players and those coaches saw what was wrong. I sat in here and talked about how George Floyd could have been any of us. I've sat in here and talked about how Philando Castile could have been any of us. I've sat in here and talked about how any number of men, black men, could have been any of us. But it doesn't seem to register with people. And I think, unfortunately, that's because it's willful. People can look at my face. People can look at me, and no matter what level of education I have, they still see me as a threat. No matter how I dress, no matter where I am, they see me as a threat. You see the videos all the time. The last time I was in here, I brought up Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper the same day that George Floyd is killed in Minneapolis. That happened in New York City. And the sports world finally had enough. And it's brought out the requisite stick to sports crew. And people who know anything about this podcast know that originally this was supposed to be a sports show. It was going to be a sports show. All right? It was supposed to be a sports show. And I felt that very quickly it wouldn't make a lot of sense for this to be a sports show because sports podcasts, sports media, there are a lot of meatheads. There's a lot of people who are thoughtless, who have a very narrow-minded, simple-minded view of what athletes should be. And it's also what drives me to try to do a show that's different because I've always said this, sports is a microcosm of society. It is. It moves the damn needle. Sports is what drives us every day. And every facet, every aspect of American life is tied to it. Every bit of American life is tied to it. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not, it is. It's like I have to collect my thoughts here for a second, and I apologize for that. But sports is the pulse of society. So when someone doesn't want to hear about quote-unquote politics in sports, despite the fact that some of the greatest political, or should I say some of the greatest sports moments in history, they're political. From Jesse Owens to the Miracle on Ice, every Olympic moment you can think of, the 1972 USA basketball controversy between the U.S. and Russia. You have the USA hockey versus Canada, USA hockey versus Russia. It's always political. It always has been and always will be. Racism is not political. It's societal. And it's something that must be touched on. And don't give me this, oh, but they're rich, it doesn't matter. As I'm recording this, Brandon Marshall, the former NFL wide receiver, had the police called on him as he was trying to move into his own damn house earlier today. Okay? We can cut this BS. We can kill this nonsense about it doesn't matter. Sports matter. And to tell athletes to simply shut up and play, unfortunately, that's also a microcosm of U.S. society. You got to understand that the same people that are quick to tell an athlete to excuse me, I get kind of choked up here. The same people that are quick to tell athletes to shut up and play and that they don't want to bring politics into sports are the same ones cheering when members of the GOP are trying to force football to happen on college campuses in the middle of a pandemic. They're the same ones to dismiss the issues of racial injustice. But you got to understand, racism is more than just the police brutality, more than just the extrajudicial killings. It's also about the redlining, the voter suppression, the gentrification, the unequal treatment in medicine, the fact that black women who have babies do not get the same care that white women get, that there's a higher probability that either the baby, the mother, or both will die or suffer serious injury than a white woman. And it drives me up the wall. And it drives a lot of us up the wall to hear our concerns dismissed. It makes us angry when there's justification for Trayvon Martin being killed, that somehow you create this narrative that a wiry 5'11", 140-pound 17-year-old is somehow this raging beast, but this fat, pudgy 17-year-old carrying an AR-15 is somehow a precocious kid who's just trying to defend some property in a city that ain't nowhere near where he lives and defend property that he don't own. This is what these athletes, this is what all of us, no matter what walk of life you're in, have been trying to tell people. And the thing is, a lot of you know this, you just don't want to acknowledge it. You don't want to accept it. It's not that you don't understand it. You just don't give a damn. And that's part of the issue. We want you to give a damn. We need you to understand that this ain't going nowhere. 2020 is a year where everybody is fed the F up. COVID has basically taken our lives and turned them inside out since March. Nobody's been whole. Large swaths of this country, people have not been able to work, haven't been able to go to school, haven't been able to live anything resembling a normal life. And the last thing we need is the original pandemic of racism just to bring that powder keg near explosion. I said it back in June. Pressure busts pipes. And the pipe has not only burst in Minneapolis, but it's burst all over this country. And how anyone can fix their ignorant face to say that racism doesn't exist, that this isn't a racist country, it's insulting, it's laughable, and it's part of the reason why we are where we are. Athletes took a major stand, the biggest stand in 50 years, and a lot of us stand with them. We're not asking for much, but at least we're not seeking revenge.